Hi, I'm Mina Malik Hussain and you're watching The Coffee Table. So, you know, on The Coffee Table, we do a lot of shows on the environment because it's a conversation that just keeps on needing to be had. Today, we're having a very specific show. Last week, you must have seen the show, I'm sure you did. We were talking about urban forests and how afforestation in urban spaces can help us control our carbon emissions and reduce our carbon footprint in different ways. But today, we're going to be talking about smog, and specifically smog in Lahore. It's a whole conversation. It's a fascinating one. And joining us today to talk about the emergency that we have at hand is Abid Omar from the Pakistan Air Quality Initiative and Hammad Naqi Khan, who is the DG of the WWF-Pakistan. Hello, gents. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Nice to have you here on the show.
Yep.
Yes, I see Abid and I have brought Borata masks today because we're very, I'm being flippant, as I tend to be on this show, but wearing your mask is crucial.
Living in Lahore, or for me, for visiting Lahore,
Yes.
I can't imagine being outside without a mask. The air here is so bad. I mean, today it's putrid. You can smell it. Yeah. It's smoky. Yeah. There's no visibility. It's like worse than sitting next to a smoking person. So
yes, it is.
It's unfortunate that, you know, in a country with so much prospects that we have to suffer this kind of levels of smog.
Yes, and it didn't used to be like this. Like when we were small, smog wasn't the issue. We used to have fog, but it was just it was just fog. It wasn't really ever smog. But what is smog?
Well, I think the smog is there. I mean, it's just that it becomes more visible during these winter months. Yes. But if you look at the ambient air quality, it's really bad. It's really bad throughout the year. Yes. And, well, the smog, or, you know, maybe people have become slightly more aware in the last few years, but the ambient air quality started turning bad for almost a decade.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because that was the time when we started, obviously, we started removing vegetation cover also from a city like Lahore. In the last, I think 15 years, 70% of the vegetation cover is gone. Yeah. And if you look at the number of vehicles which are being registered in this city, and if it's 30% increase, you know, every year. So the city is not designed for that. So more vehicles and the urbanization, the so-called industrialization, and the major culprit is the quality of fuel. Despite all the efforts, despite all the commitments by the government and clear instructions to the refineries and to the oil marketing companies to come up with clean fuels, a lot of subsidies being given, a lot of incentives are being given, but the result is, unfortunately, is zero, no progress. Let me share with you one incident where I think a couple of years ago, one of the Japanese vehicle manufacturer, okay, let me name it, Honda, they formally and officially complained to the federal government that the vehicles that they are, they're assembling or manufacturing in Pakistan and they introduce in the market, the engine, you know, the engine gets like damaged in a year's time, and the major culprit is the fuel. And then when they did some research, they came to know that the refineries are adding manganese because government has set up certain regulations. It's like RON 92. That's every refinery has to meet that.
Right. RON 92.
Yeah. RON, this is octane number.
That's an octane.
That's octane. You know. So to convert to low quality fuel, which they refine. To meet that standard, they add manganese. Okay. And now manganese is obviously it's damaging for the vehicle, but it's also very damaging for human health. Because
so the thing that they're using to make the fuel better is actually really harmful.
Yeah, because they, you know, by adding that chemical, that additive, they meet the local regulatory requirement, regulatory standard.
They're not adding this to make the fuel better.
Right.
Yeah.
They're adding it to meet a fuel standard.
Exactly.
Which is the wrong way of setting standards.
Absolutely wrong.
Okay.
You don't need to set standards of what should be in the fuel. Rather, what the standards are is what's coming out of the tailpipe of
Exactly.
a car or a truck or bus or
like
whatever.
what's happening after combustion.
Exactly. And that in turn then defines what are the components of the fuel. So
Right.
for example, adding manganese helps it meet an octane number, helps it perhaps burn differently.
Yes.
But the impact of this manganese, when it's released in the air, it's going into your respiratory system. And that's one big myth, is that a lot of people think that this is limited to your lungs.
Right.
But you're talking about pollutants on such a micro level, on a molecular level.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about like, molecules smaller than a blood cell.
Yeah,
So
that is tiny, and though that's what PM 2.5 is.
That's invisible.
PM,
Yeah.
PM 2.5 is particulate matter.
Right.
And that's another myth, because when people hear the word particulate, they think that we're talking about particles and dust. But
Yeah.
actually, you're talking about all these elements. You're talking
Yeah.
about manganese. You're talking about even natural elements like calcium, magnesium, which is, part of our salt.
Right.
You're talking about combustion byproducts, which could be black carbon, manganese, lead, iron,
Sulfur in the diesel.
I'm
Sulfur in
just
the diesel.
trying to contribute.
So, all these so-called particulate matters,
Yeah.
these are very, very tiny. And we're worried about the ones which are not dust size, which are the bigger ones, which are PM10 or even bigger, but the PM 2.5, which means smaller than 2.5 micrograms in size, which also means it's so small that it's 30 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. It's many times smaller than a red blood cell.
What?
And this, when you breathe it in, there's only one direction it goes. In. It never
Yes.
goes out.
Yeah.
It never goes out.
It never
like
goes
you
out.
can't cough it out. You can't excrete it in any other way.
No.
You can't drink lots of water.
Because once it goes into your lungs, it absorbs into the blood vessels.
Right.
And then it's in your bloodstreams.
Forever.
And forever. And then it lodges in your body, for example, lodge in your brain.
Right.
And especially the young or the unborn fetus, like it goes into their brain, into their lungs, into their heart. The body's development gets hindered.
Quite right.
We're talking about major health issues coming out of this. So the levels of pollution that you see in Pakistan are so unprecedented. I mean, we are seeing the worst in the world. Like right now, it's hazardous over here.
Yes.
LA had huge pollution problems in the 1990s. You may have heard about it. LA was known as the smoggy city. Like
I mean, they were the first country to came up with Clean Air Act. They were the first country which started a proper comprehensive ambient air quality monitoring. Because in our case, I think as Abid also mentioned, the proper ambient air quality monitoring is not there.
So what is ambient air quality?
Ambient air quality is where a human or, they are exposed to the air, at that level. We're not talking about, the 100 meters.
Stratosphere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's
just
like
the sort of air around us that we kind of encounter on a daily.
Which is around you.
Okay.
That's one thing. The second, you talked about the health impacts. I mean, there's a maybe a general understanding or information that, okay, it just impacts the lungs or the upper respiratory tract.
Yeah.
No. The rising number of cardiovascular diseases, even, the skin cancer, asthma, so bronchitis.
Yeah.
There are so many other diseases. Now, the problem, again, in a country like Pakistan is that we do not do epidemiological studies where you correlate, okay, these are the rising number of cases being reported, to medical practitioners or to hospitals. So what is the reason? What is the root cause, and then people are dying, literally. People are dying. The life expectancy has reduced, particularly in, Punjab, urban areas, and particularly areas which are, in and around Lahore division. So who's going to, come up with such stats and data that we need to do? It needs urgent action. It's not,
And we can't sort of formulate a plan until we have data. And data is something that's really controversial these days because there is a narrative that the government has that, well, our data shows this, but a lot of people are monitoring air quality with their own devices. And then there are also things like the consulate the US Council has its own device, and there are different monitoring sort of stations, and people are able to keep track of the airs. It's not really classified information at all.
Well, the government has a responsibility to its citizens to provide certain information.
Yes.
For example, the Met Department is obliged to provide weather data. They tell you the temperature, the humidity levels, whether it's raining, how much rainfall happened, and you don't just see it, the real-time figures. They also give you a forecast. So there's a whole mechanism behind it. Similarly, the Environmental Protection Agency is mandated to provide real-time data. And there's a reason why this data is necessary. It's not just, arbitrary that, okay, data for the sake of data, but it's a health issue.
Yes.
Air pollution is not about, smoggy skies, but it's because of the impact on the health. And the impact is tremendous. We're talking about a 5-year reduction in life expectancy. Last year, we were at a climate air pollution-related event at the National Assembly, and a doctor from the Children's Hospital, which happens to be one of the largest children's hospitals in Asia.
In Asia?
Yeah. They looked at their data, and they were very surprised to find out there's a direct correlation. They haven't published this as a study yet, but there's a direct correlation between increasing pollution levels and hospital admission rates. So, for example, if on a normal day you have 100 patients coming in for whatever various issues, on smoggy days, that number doubles or even triples.
Good grief. We're just going to take a very quick break and come back very soon to talk about the health emergency we have on our hands. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're talking to Abid, Omar and Hammad Khan about smog in Lahore. It's very serious. We might be smiling, but we mean business. So Abid, Abid, tell me, how did you start the Pakistan Air Quality Initiative? What happened?
Till a few years ago, well, from 2012, I was living in Beijing, China.
Oh, that's the sort of...
That's the epicenter of the air pollution crisis. That's where it all started. And there, when I'd, go outside and tell people that it's polluted and, look, you can't see the sun.
Yes.
They'd say it's a foggy day, and how beautiful is fog, everything's shrouded in mist.
Sounds so familiar, people are like, oh.
And fog has a certain romance associated with it, and people don't realize what's in the air is actually dangerous. So that led me to start thinking that, people in Lahore say the same thing. I mean, in the last years, we started hearing that, flights are being cancelled because of the fog, and, traffic has come to a standstill. And I was like, what's the air like in Lahore? So actually, I brought one of these air quality monitors with me just on a trip. I have family in Lahore. I'm from Karachi. So I brought it around. I took it to Karachi. I took it to Lahore. This was in 2016. And I saw, what the air was like. And then that could have been that. But then I realized that we need...
And what was the air like in 2016?
The air, it was one of those days where in Lahore, where the air wasn't bad.
Oh,
and
okay.
It was February 2016.
Fluke days.
It was a fluke day. But, it was just one thing that you don't need to know how it is right now. You need to know how it is over the course of the year. Does it vary between seasons? And, I mean, you need to know it actually all the time, like it's like a weather forecast. So,
and that's why the data, collecting the data is important, because you can't really have a picture unless you have it over an extended period of time.
Exactly. And then I looked on the internet. I was like, there must be data available. So, unfortunately, the only data that was publicly available was at least 10 years old.
Oh, so there was no data available.
There was no data to speak of. It was all outdated data, which unfortunately, it's released as new data every year by the World Health Organization.
Same data.
And when you look in the details,
the same old data.
You find out it's from 2 weeks of 2008 for Karachi, for example. And I was like, this can't be it.
That's quite terrifying. And exactly.
So then I was like, the government's not doing it. No international organization is doing it. So let me just set up my own monitoring network.
Well, thank you very much, Abid.
And we have one of those monitors here right now.
Yes.
And on this screen, you can see that inside, it's actually excellent over here, which is very unusual for Lahore. And outside, you see it's hazardous.
Yes, so we've got the sort of sad faces. And outside, it's gas mask.
It's gas mask.
It's gas mask, which is
This is not fit for human inhabitation. Like, it's showing 499 outside. You know, after 500, the index
Coffee table
stops.
is 46. We have a very clean studio here. And outside, we are literally almost at 500. Good grief.
That's the maximum limit for any air quality index. It doesn't go beyond that. That's like...
Because so no monitor can sort of give you a reading beyond 500?
They don't like any index doesn't go beyond that.
It just explodes after that.
The people who created the index said, you know, after, like, it'll never get to 500. So why
how sweet of them, how kind. But, you know, Delhi was like 1200, I believe,
because
a few weeks ago.
You can, if you want, you can extrapolate the numbers to go up even higher, but most of the meters don't do that. Lahore, just last week on Monday, it was about 700.
It was.
Schools were shut over here.
It was, yes. Yeah, and you know, it was like an actual kind of, it was like a physical presence, the smog. It was so sort of heavy and it almost, it smelled like burning.
Exactly, that something is burning inside the house.
And you know, initially I thought maybe my neighbors have a real fondness for burning leaves. Even now, and I thought, well, maybe they're burning leaves again. So I sort of ran over and looked over the wall like a real padosan, you know.
Yeah.
And they weren't doing anything. It was this smog.
Exactly. And, you know, you mentioned about this burning of leaves. Despite the fact that if you look at some of the policies, the regulatory framework which is in place, you know, and if you look at the sources, major sources of smog in Lahore, you know, the fuel quality, the vehicular pollution, the industries, brick kilns and steel furnaces, steel re-rolling mills, dust. I mean, you know, we don't have a lot of rainfall, and because of construction and because of multiple reasons, there's a lot of dust in Lahore, and that also, you know,
and even road dust.
In the road dust, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of Lahore has been dug up for various disastrous projects.
For various development projects.
Disaster projects. And they're just piles of dirt everywhere, even now.
And then, you know, obviously it's compounded when the farmers start burning the rice stubble.
Yes, this is a great favorite sort of reason why people like to trot out. It's the crop burning and the farmers are burning stubble. But hasn't that been happening for like centuries? Haven't farmers been doing that?
Let me come to this, but I was telling that the burning of solid waste to leaves is completely banned. But you still, you know, any morning, you travel, suppose from Bahria town, you know, on the canal bank, which is like one of the main arteries. You can see so many spots where either the dry leaves or the municipal solid waste is being burned. You go outside Lahore, so it's banned. It's completely banned, but still so many cases. Now come
can one phone someone to report this kind of thing?
Actually, it's been happening. I mean, they have introduced this helpline. People, you know, take pictures from their mobile phones and they send it to the PM Citizens portal, you know, because with an assumption that some action, you know, will be taken.
So, but talking about the regulatory framework, right? Yeah. The framework that we have is a knee-jerk reaction. Where people say that we've banned crop residue burning, we've banned
we have closed the brick kilns for 3 months.
We've banned brick kilns. But the reality of the situation is that firstly, we can't regulate these bans. We don't have the manpower to
resources
actually enforce
actually have a team of people who can go around checking.
But it's a wrong kind of approach.
Yes.
Banning thing never works.
No, it really doesn't.
You have to provide solutions, alternatives. For example, urban waste burning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some people wonder what could be an alternative. It's done all over the world. You go and pick up the trash and you take it to a landfill, you take it to a proper incinerator if that's what you want to do. But there are ways to manage
or compost.
trash.
Organic matter has to be composted.
Right.
Because you know, whatever comes outside, it has to go back.
Yeah, and like you said, there are other countries have systems in place where urban waste is effectively managed. So it's not like no one knows what to do and one is in some deep conundrum about this. But sort of cycling back to crop burning, because that's something I know that the WWF is doing some work around that.
So we recently started a program because we also wanted to understand. I mean, the thing is, as I think Abid also mentioned, okay, we have banned, you know, as per clause 144, farmers cannot burn. But what is the situation on ground?
Yes.
Most of the farmers still burn. So
Because that's
what's
the most
reason?
effective
We
way.
need to understand, you know, so there's a very short period between the rice harvest and wheat sowing. So farmers, you know, and most of the farmers, they're small farmers.
Yeah.
So what is the alternative? And that's where a balance between carrot and stick, you know, comes in. So the alternative is that the typical combine harvester is not suitable. I mean, leaves, straws, and farmers, they don't have any choice. So the alternative is technologies like Happy Seeder, which is widely now being promoted in India and also now, you know, in Pakistan as well.
A Happy Seeder.
It's called Happy Seeder, and it, you know, you can use it for wheat sowing without, you know, in the presence of the stubble.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to get rid of the stubble too.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is like special harvesters. Kabuta is like one example, but there are. So we have like we procured few, and then we have, you know, we started giving it to farmers. But that's not like that's like a very small activity. So what needs to be done is government normally provides subsidies.
Yeah.
For laser land leveling, they provided subsidy to the farmers. 50%, you know, you pay, and 50% is paid by the government. For efficient irrigation, drip irrigation, government provided subsidies. So I think this is a good example where government has to subsidize. That's one.
Yeah.
Then secondly, government provides subsidized agriculture inputs or wheat seeds to the farmers. I think it's important to link it. It should not be free. It should be, there should be some strings attached. And what are those strings? The strings is, okay, number one, you don't burn your rice stubble. If you burn, you don't get the subsidized, you know, that's one thing. The second is that, as I mentioned, the subsidies. But I think we used to have these very good kind of cooperatives or farmer organizations. They do not exist anymore. Because that's where the farmers, they pool their resources, government provides some, you know, support and help, and then they have access to such technology. And they're not, obviously they are expensive for small farmers, but if there is like a collective procurement.
Exactly, and this is the interest of the greater good is at stake here.
Exactly.
So if the government works directly with farmers to sort of create sustainable agricultural practices,
so
then
just
that will make a big difference.
banning the burning will not serve the purpose. I remember in one of the meetings, the field staff said, "Oh, we don't have the capacity. We are, you know, we are so less in number. We cannot control that." And then, you know, the senior official said, "Okay, just focus the farms along the major highways or the motorway, because that's where people, you know, drive and they take pictures and they put that
that's where all the proof
on social media." So what about, you know, these thousands and thousands of hectares which are slightly away from the major highways? That's where the actual problem. And that's like if the wind direction is towards, you know, Lahore, everything, you know, comes here. And if the wind direction is from east to west, everything from India also sometimes comes here. It's not that, you know, no. So the two things. Either to blame them and for literally everything, that it's just because of our neighbors that this is happening, which is everybody knows that's not the case.
And everybody loves to do this.
We have to make our own house in order.
Yes, quite right. This is a national pastime to pass the buck.
It's an easy scapegoat. Because when people look now at the crop burning fires, you can see it through satellite imagery.
NASA images.
And it shows just like a red dot wherever there's a fire. And in India, because there's a lot more farming happening there, it's a bigger area. If you look at it today, there are crop fires everywhere. On the Pakistan side, there are less. So people say, oh, all this pollution is coming from India. But what they don't realize is that our crop burning season is a little displaced from the Indian one.
Yeah, they start first.
Ours happens roughly 2 weeks after.
Yeah.
And then when you look 2 weeks afterwards, you'll see more fires on this side and less on the other side.
So just a matter of when you're choosing to sort of snapshot to your satellite.
You can use data to tell any story you want, you know. So, but that's why you need to have a smart look at the data and understand what it is. If you just look at a snapshot, you're going to be easily misled. And that is why people love to point fingers. They're like, look, all of this is happening in India, so the pollution must be coming from there. But there's one meteorological fact which you can't deny, that for much of the winter months, the wind direction is from, like, it's almost exactly in a straight line from Lahore to New Delhi.
Thank you.
So if anything, we're sending the pollution their way. There are, of course, you know, the wind direction changes often enough, and there are days when it is coming from the Indian side towards here, but that's relatively infrequent.
This is a very important point, that the wind, most of the times at this time of the year, the wind is not coming from India. If anything, it's us to them.
And there's another thing that needs to be added to it, is that why do we see a pollution hotspot right over Lahore and not at the Indian border, for example? And we also see a pollution hotspot over New Delhi and other cities.
Which is quite a distance from Lahore.
And also quite a distance from where these fires are happening. Is that the biggest source of the pollution? We've already said our transportation and crop residue burning kind of helps put us over the edge. But you know, it's important to also understand why it's happening in Lahore and New Delhi, and actually it's happening in all of Punjab, wherever you're creating pollution.
Yeah. And I'm going to interrupt you here because I want to leave the suspense for after the break, which we are taking right now. See you in 1 Welcome back to the coffee table. We left you on a cliffhanger as to why Lahore and New Delhi are so polluted. Abid, tell us.
So we're very unlucky, the people who live in Lahore or in Punjab, because we suffer what you can call a meteorological misfortune.
Oh, gosh.
It's a natural phenomenon that happens over the winter months, where we have a temperature inversion. So, you know, normally you wake up in the morning, the sun comes out, starts heating up the ground, and the hot air starts rising. So whatever's close to the ground, which is, it could be fog, it's, of course, now the bigger concern is the emission sources, all the air pollution. So that together with the heat rising hot air dissipates into the upper atmosphere. But because of this temperature inversion, it doesn't dissipate. It stays close to the ground, close to where we live and breathe. It stays trapped. And so these emissions keep building up and building up. And, you know, as the cars you're driving and the buses are going by and the industries are operating, which operate equally year-round, and even crop residue burning, you know, more of it happens in the summer than happens nowadays. So, but in the winter is when we see this meteorological misfortune.
Oh, because it doesn't, in Lahore at least, it doesn't get hot enough for all these sort of emissions and bad stuff to rise up into the air and dissipate.
Well, it's also the winter season,
you know,
that's the temperature
down.
Inversions, because the pollutants, they kind of remain trapped. You know.
It doesn't sort of, it doesn't dissipate, and that's what happens to us in the winter. Has this always been the case for Lahore? I wonder.
As Hammad was saying earlier, is that as, you know, we have more industry, economic growth, more development, more cars.
It's getting worse.
So the amount of emissions is more, and therefore it's getting worse. Now, if you wonder about Karachi, for example, which is also a big city, and we have similar emissions, Karachi, on the other hand, is a lucky city.
Oh.
So lucky in
some
sense, not in
well,
all
I don't begrudge them.
As a Lahori, I feel proud of being Lahori, but
But I'm like, okay, well, at least everyone is not suffering.
we don't have sea. That's the
So, because of the sea and because of the strong sea breeze that happens during much of the year, the pollution gets blown away.
Oh, but then where does it go? It doesn't sort of vanish. It just gets pushed away somewhere else.
It dissipates in the upper atmosphere, but you see, then it stops being cause for concern. Because it's only when it builds up that it becomes a pollutant, which
gets concentrated.
For example, carbon dioxide, right? That's also considered pollutant, but you will never see carbon dioxide levels, outdoors at least, which are harmful to human health.
Okay, why is that?
Because the level doesn't build up so much. Rather, carbon dioxide is a climate change issue, which means that it's contributing towards global warming, but if you breathe it in, you have nothing to worry about.
You're okay, because your body can assimilate it and it's fine.
Because there's so little of it.
Right,
The concentration is so low, but the concentrations of nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, or even our ozone concentrations, our carbon monoxide concentrations. You know, I mean, carbon monoxide, you breathe that in, you die.
Yeah, basically, straight out.
Exactly.
That's it.
So I was looking at the data that the Environmental Protection Department puts out. So we looked at the data for all of last year. And we even saw that according to the government's own data, our carbon monoxide levels are above our own safe limits.
Our own. So even Pakistan's safe limit is being exceeded.
Exactly.
for carbon monoxide.
As it is being exceeded in Lahore for nitrogen dioxide, for sulfur
a lot of other
dioxide,
parameters.
for all the parameters.
So how is it possible that we still are able to grow crops and things? How are plants not dying?
No, but the thing is that
how are animals okay?
If you compare our yield, I mean, obviously there are multiple factors, but if you compare our yield, take any commodity, wheat, rice, or for that matter, cotton, and compare it with other countries in the region, our yield is less.
It is. So it is being affected.
And when you compare it with in a water productivity terms, again, we use more water. And then there has been research where high levels of lead were found exposed in some of the crops. And where does the lead come from? It comes from the vehicular emissions.
Right.
And
so it's
obviously,
the air, literally
the lead
the air
is
that's touching
dangerous for
your crops.
the brain development for kids, for children. And that's the reason that lead was removed from these paints.
Yes.
So I think that we need to understand that all these parameters, and if you ignore one sector, you are increasing the burden of another sector. You ignore environment, it's your health sector.
Yes.
People lose productivity hours. People spend more money to consult doctors and to buy medicines.
Yes,
where does this
quite
money
right,
come
absolutely.
from? So you are ignoring one sector and you are increasing the burden of another sector. Look at the condition of our hospitals. What's happening in government hospitals?
Respiratory disease has skyrocketed.
Yeah, so, literally everybody is coughing these days.
Yes.
Everybody has some kind of eye infection
eye or
irritations.
There are these two very abstract sounding numbers when people talk about the impacts of air pollution. The first is that 135,000 deaths are attributed in Pakistan to air pollution. I mean, it's a number, you don't know how to
quantify
think about
that.
But one way to look at it is that more people die from air pollution every year than had ever died on the war on terrorism in the last 15, 18 years. And another number is that there's
I want to hear the other number.
is that there's a 5-year loss in life expectancy in Punjab, 2-year life expectancy loss in Islamabad because of air pollution. So now what Hammad was saying about these patients going to the hospitals, this is how it's quantified. Like you go to the hospitals, you see more people coming in, that same person can't go to school or work, isn't a productive member of society, isn't able to contribute. There are economic costs associated with. We were talking about the impact on crops. So crops can't photosynthesize that effectively when it's highly polluted. So you're losing on crop yield. So these are all costs. So people imagine that it's going to cost a lot of money to clean up the air and to clean up the environment. Actually, the opposite is true. You're going to start saving money.
Yes. Because in the long run, you're making an environment which is, again, clean and sustainable. And in a lot of countries, they just shut down when the air quality index goes above a certain level. You're not supposed to go to school, you're not supposed to go to work, you're not supposed to be exposed.
Because these are the countries, they have realized that this is an important issue. These are the countries who have put up these ambient air quality monitoring stations literally on highways, inside the cities or on major roads. And they can also, so they do a couple of things. A, it's also good for traffic management. If there's like the level is going, in the red or yellow or amber, they ensure that less traffic goes there, right?
Right.
And sometimes they increase the pollution charge, the toll, which is normally there, because they want to discourage motorists to, and it's also, good for the public at large. That this, and if they're traveling with patients, with elderly people, with kids, okay,
you know how to be
I'm not supposed to go, in that, because I think, as we discussed earlier, even within a city like Lahore, there are hot spots. It's not that across the board it's the same kind of air quality. Sometimes, it's bad literally everywhere, but there are hot spots where it's
like incredibly, like just mental.
I can't find a word, to explain that. And that's where, we need to take action. That gives us automatically gives sense to the government to prioritize their action. Which sector, which area. And that's where, because otherwise they will always say, oh, no, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, we don't have the manpower. Okay, this is the sector and this is the area. So this should be your top priority.
A really targeted and focused approach.
Exactly, to start with.
So, Abid, what can we do as regular, citizens to help make the situation better? Like one thing I know is that the air quality index is really bad during the day when it's time for kids to go to school. So pick up and drop off time. So carpooling, I imagine, would be something that would help.
Usually, the night and the early morning is the worst.
Yeah.
Okay.
So starting from late evening to till 11, 12 in the morning.
Because it's cold and everything settles?
On the personal level, you can do carpooling, you can take public transportation, you can reduce your own emissions, for example, by not turning on a generator when the pollution, or you can stop using an air conditioner. But the pollution levels are so bad and so dangerous that I think what's more important is that how can you take care of your own health? Because you have to protect yourself, you have to protect your family, the elderly, the kids. So wearing these smog masks, I mean, we said when we started, it's unfortunate, but this is what you have to do. You have to wear these.
Wear your mask.
We're indoors right now, so it's very good. But
it's comfortable. It comes in colors. It matches my outfit.
So there's so little that the impact of efforts of ordinary citizens can take, because you can't go out there and improve the fuel quality, because that is what will make a much more substantial impact. You can't go out there and say that, you know, this steel re-rolling mill should be using better fuel materials to start with.
And I suppose that it would be useful, because I know that a lot of people have monitors like these ones in their homes, and this is all part of a network.
Exactly.
So everyone is contributing to data collection.
Yes.
Which is also pretty useful.
And this is one thing ordinary citizens can really do, because I mean, it actually helps us, it helps the government, it helps know where the hotspots are. I mean, this is what we call citizen science, where just anyone can contribute towards scientific efforts.
Yeah, yeah. And these monitors are reliable and they're accurate.
They're reliable enough.
Right.
Yeah, so you can't say that they can be used for like scientific research.
Right.
Because sometimes, you know, that's like one argument which is given by the government people about the reliability and authenticity of the data.
Yeah.
So they're more maybe qualitative than quantitative, but they give you fair like amount of information which is required. You know.
It's enough. It's enough to go by.
It's enough to take action, actually. It's not that if you're doing some high-tech scientific research that you rely on that, but I mean, it's not required.
Yeah, because it's so bad that this is enough.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, you might have a measuring tape.
Yeah.
But even that measuring tape is not a scientific instrument. You have to calibrate it against a reference rate instrument, which costs a lot of money, and it's, you know, validated and calibrated and so forth. So similarly with this, like, you know, if the margin of error in this, I mean, the US EPA did a test on these particular monitors, and I think the margin of error was like a couple of percentage.
Which is pretty great.
We're talking about less, I think less than 5%.
Wow.
So on the other hand, there's also margin of error on the instruments you're supposed to use. They're only, let's say, 99.9% accurate. There's no such thing as 100.
And even if they are not properly calibrated and they're not properly maintained, that's what actually happened with EPA. You know, they got some equipment from JICA, you know, but if they were not properly maintained. And look at the condition of that, you know, that equipment. So they recently also bought. But if
so we do have equipment.
We have put up, like the EPA recently bought, I think they put up like two.
But don't we need more than two?
Oh yeah, now the plan is, because they recently got funding from the World Bank for a Punjab Environment Development Program. And I think they're putting up 30 in Punjab 30. And 10 in Lahore. So that's like, it was long overdue, but I'm still happy, you know, that they're going ahead, because we need data. But and we need more actions than data.
Yes,
you know, data is required, you know,
because we have a lot of initiatives
to support. And then this is not rocket science, and this is not something new. You know, you asked in the beginning, then when did it start? I remember, I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago, there was a writ petition filed in the Lahore High Court that the air quality is very good and we are suffering. So the Lahore High Court constituted a commission. I was a member of that commission. This is like we're talking about 8 or 10 years ago, when supposedly the air quality was much better. So we met the senior management of refineries, with car manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, with the government people, so literally everybody.
Yes.
And then through a very consultative process, supported by solid science, we came up with a set of recommendations which were submitted to the government, to the court, Lahore. Lahore High Court adopted those, those recommendations. Obviously, few actions were taken, like the two-stroke rickshaws were banned. A lot of rickshaws were, converted to four-stroke or to CNG.
But then what about the other recommendations?
But the other recommendations, so literally, look at the recommendations related to fuel quality. Look at the recommendations related to vehicle fitness certificate. Sometimes the vehicle doesn't go to the facility and they get the certificate.
You have to focus on where you get the most bang for your buck, in a way. Because we can't afford to do everything.
So
these two things, the fuel quality and vehicle fitness. I mean, if you do these, I would say overnight,
50%
you will get
60% will be
an amazing reduction. You ban crop residue burning, you'll have a minor reduction. So,
but we need to do that also.
We need to do
but
so
if we
many
had
things
to choose like the top two things, that would be transport and fuel.
Transportation sector, specifically fuel, and do a fitness test. I mean, we have an infrastructure in place for it, but right now the fitness test, it's mandatory for commercial vehicles, but the vehicle doesn't even have to go there. You just pay someone, 200 rupees and you get the certificate.
But I think they were now talking about introducing the MOT, which is used in UK. This is like, and it has to be for literally all the vehicles.
Exactly. I was just thinking about that,
and
that you can take your own car and have it.
We said as part of the Commission's recommendations, outsource that to the oil marketing companies like Shell, PSO. And they should check, they should, put the equipment, they should issue the certificate, because just in case, if they issue a fake certificate,
then they can be held accountable.
It's like the, the PSO, the call tax, or the Shell, or the Total. So they will not do that. I mean, that's the understanding.
A private-public partnership actually helps things around. The government puts in the framework, and like you put in checks and balances to make sure the private organization is following them. On the contrary, what happens here is that if the government is doing something, citizens say the government isn't doing it the right way. Like people doubt the data coming from the Environmental Protection Department as well as other agencies. So I think here a partnership would actually help both sides.
Quite right. I think this is, well, I think we've got some ideas which I think if are implemented, we can sort of pull this thing together and we can make a difference. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show. And it was the most edifying conversation, and I'm feeling less panicked about the situation at hand. But this is not to say that this is not an emergency. This is an emergency, and we have to take it seriously. There are measures that we can take, but we have to take them. We can't ignore this anymore. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, and wear your mask. We'll see you next time on the coffee table. Peace out.